She suffered so much, she just finally gave out. I loved her and missed her terribly.
We shouldn't have to deal with this. He was 6 years old.
I remember opening my eyes and seeing Bernie's head covered in blood lying on my shoulder.
Good morning. Please be seated.
As your honor is aware,
Deborah Langmeyer was in the car with her husband, 59-year-old Bernard Langmeyer, at the time of the incident.
Spare my children and my family and me any more pain. Please sentence the defendant to the maximum sentence.
In May 2024, they were involved in a collision on I-96 near Hudsonville. The accident occurred when a semi-truck failed to notice stop traffic and crashed into their vehicle.
I remember opening my eyes and seeing Bernie's head covered in blood lying on my shoulder. His eyes were open, but he was dead.
Deborah says her memory of that day is hazy, but she vividly recalls being taken to the hospital after the crash.
I remember the staff at the hospital pressing my head together, needle after needle in my head, while 25 staples were put into my head. It hurt like nothing I have ever felt before.
As Deborah spoke, she gazed at the man responsible, 47-year-old Richard Risch. Risch began to cry when images of the victim, Bernard, were shown in court. Bernard was a father and grandfather who had retired from UPS just 2 months before the crash.
I just wanted to apologize to the family. I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't help and it never will.
Risch admitted to drinking before the crash and blew nearly twice the legal limit on a breathalyzer test.
I hope that it serves a message to every drunk driver out there that somebody's life could be impacted.
Deborah Langmeyer spoke in court, urging the judge to impose the maximum sentence on Richard Risch for his involvement in the crash. Risch was sentenced to between 6 and 15 years in prison after pleading no contest to operating while intoxicated, causing death. He expressed sincere remorse for his actions. Although this was his first offense for drunk driving, records show that Risch has a lengthy history of traffic and driving violations. The murder trial of Delvecchio Patrick commenced in Dallas, featuring harrowing testimonies and jurors listening to distressing 911 calls. This case prompted significant changes in how Dallas handles 911 calls related to domestic violence. During the trial, jurors heard Deanna Cook pleading for her life while being attacked. She was on the phone with dispatchers at the time. Defense attorneys argued that Delvecchio Patrick did not kill his ex-wife, Deanna Cook. Meanwhile, prosecutors presented extensive details about the case, emphasizing the anger it has stirred, but urged the jurors to focus on Patrick and the charges he faces. Due to the graphic and disturbing nature of Deanna Cook's 911 call, most of it cannot be broadcast. However, we will be playing a brief portion, and we caution that it may be upsetting to sensitive viewers.
How would you describe their relationship? How were they together?
Rocky.
Vicky Cook, Deanna Cook's mother, testified in court, describing how her daughter and Delvecchio Patrick didn't just argue, but would physically fight, often injuring each other during their 4-year turbulent relationship. Delvecchio Patrick sat in court with a full head of braided hair, a stark contrast to his appearance when he was arrested, at which time he was bald. Vicky Cook testified about what she and her other daughters discovered when they went to Deanna's home.
When Carlita kicked the door in, the smell hit her and she just turned and ran. And I went in, and the water, like it was so high, it was covering my feet.
Vicky Cook moved through the house to the bedroom and then opened the door to Deanna's bathroom.
I like a shadow. I shadow behind the curtain, and I started screaming because it was her, and the water was still running. The water was still running, and I just said, he said he was gonna do it, and he did it. He did it.
Tears filled the courtroom as Vicky Cook delivered her heart-wrenching testimony. Judge Brendan Birmingham called for a recess. Delvecchio Patrick showed no emotion in response to her account, but the jurors gazed at him, some wiping tears from their eyes. When court resumed, Deanna Cook's 911 call from August 17th was played, though much of it was too disturbing to air. What you will hear now is deeply unsettling, as Deanna Cook desperately begged for her life.
Help me!
When prosecutor Trace Stock asked Vicky Cook if she could identify the male voice on the 911 call, she extended her arm and glared at the defendant. We also heard from Detective Julia Menchaca, the police officer who was first assigned to the call. She explained that she did not receive enough urgent information from dispatchers to justify kicking down the door to Deanna Cook's home. When she arrived on August 17, 2012, she observed nothing out of the ordinary. In May 2015, Delvecchio Patrick was convicted of murdering his ex-wife, Deanna Cook, in 2012. The jury sentenced him to 85 years in prison, along with a $10,000 fine. While Patrick's defense team suggested a more lenient sentence, prosecutors pushed for life imprisonment. As of September 2023, Patrick is serving his sentence at the William G. McConnell Unit in Beeville, Texas. A Tampa man charged with DUI manslaughter in the death of a bicyclist more than a year ago had an emotional outburst in court. Taylor Moyes pleaded guilty after striking a deal with prosecutors, but the proceedings took a dramatic turn when he heard from the victim's family. The emotional victim impact statements were deeply moving, but it was the words of one family member that caused Moyes to lose control. The disruption occurred right in the middle of testimony.
I will never forget the cry that followed or the words of the medical examiner.
The defendant, Taylor Moyes, let out a wailing scream in the courtroom before collapsing to the ground, overcome with tears. To understand the depth of his emotional reaction, it's necessary to revisit the crime scene. Over a year ago, Joshua Kidd was struck and killed while riding his bike along Hartford and South 54th Street in Tampa. Moyes, driving under the influence and speeding at over 109 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone, caused a crash that resulted in Joshua's tragic death.
There's an agreement then?
At his plea sentencing, Joshua's mother was the first to speak.
Mr. Moyes took my son from me. He took a grandson, he took a brother, and he took a father. Our lives are forever changed. The pain that Mr. Moyes has brought to our family is indescribable. It is unfair that due to your choice, that I'll never see my son.
Then, Joshua's father took the stand and spoke.
I just don't agree with the sentence. I think that everybody should be able to look at the pictures. I don't want to see him. My son was in 6 pieces, and I don't think that it's fair that I think he should get the max.
However, it was the heartfelt words from Joshua's little sister that brought the defendant to tears. Moyes was escorted out of the courtroom during his emotional breakdown, but was brought back a few minutes later to hear the judge's final words.
I hope to learn from this and certainly the horrible decision you made that led to just destroying lives. So.
Under the plea agreement, the defendant was sentenced to 12 years in prison, followed by 9 years of probation. However, for the family, this outcome will never bring true relief. It was an incredibly difficult hearing to cover.
Love her and miss her terribly.
The courtroom was filled with tears as a man whose wife was killed in a brutal pit bull attack shared his grief. A judge sentenced Carla Cornelio to 4 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter after her dogs escaped and fatally attacked her elderly neighbor. With trembling hands, James Mendoza put on his glasses to deliver a heartfelt statement directed at Cornelio, who is now facing prison time for his wife's tragic death.
I spent many years in the military. I never seen nothing like that. She was completely tore up.
In the summer of 2011, Cornelio's pit bulls attacked her 75-year-old neighbor, Emako Mendoza. The dogs broke through a fence and viciously mauled the elderly woman in her own yard. Her husband, his voice trembling, struggled to recount the harrowing moment he found her.
And I just couldn't believe. I was really in shock that morning.
The attack left her with devastating injuries, resulting in the loss of both legs and an arm. After 6 months of struggling, she passed away from her injuries on Christmas Eve. Mendoza painfully recounted this heartbreaking battle to Cornelio.
She suffered so much, she just finally gave out. I loved her and missed her terribly.
The judge did not hand down the maximum sentence in Cornelio's case, but came close, giving her 4 years in prison. However, for the widowed husband, it was still not enough.
I hope they do some suffering, just like my wife did. She suffered a lot. And I very miss her so much.
Cornelio and her mother, Alba, were both convicted in this case. Alba's sentencing was initially delayed as she was hospitalized undergoing treatment for leukemia. However, in March 2013, before her sentencing could occur, Alba passed away from natural causes after being convicted of the same charges.
I have to deal with this. He was 6 years old.
The courtroom was filled with emotion as the mother of a young boy shared her grief over the tragic loss of her son, Logan, who was mauled while walking to school with his friends. Logan was killed, and his, Syrai Sanders, was severely injured and rushed into surgery. Syrai is now recovering, while animal control has captured the dogs responsible for the attack. Cameron Tucker, the dog's owner, made his first court appearance as charges against him were upgraded. It was an incredibly emotional day for the grieving family as they spoke publicly for the first time about the heartbreaking incident.
In his 6 short years, he touched so many people. So many people.
Heartbroken by the loss of her precious son, Angelica found solace in knowing that Logan passed away the same way he lived his life, always trying to help others.
And that's what he did. He protected everybody, and that's what he did.
Logan's mother shared that her son died heroically while trying to protect his neighbor, Syrai Sanders, who was attacked by 3 dogs on their way to the bus stop. Logan bravely tried to fend off the dogs, but they turned on him, tragically taking his life. Syrai was critically injured, but survived the attack.
He was put here for a special reason, and I didn't know why. And that's what it was.
That's going to be a total of $70,000 good bond.
Charges against the dog's owner, Cameron Tucker, were upgraded to involuntary manslaughter. During his first court appearance, Tucker was held on a $70,000 bond.
Mr. Tucker is shocked, he's saddened, and he is surprised that this has occurred.
The defense attorney described 31-year-old Cameron Tucker as a family man, emphasizing that he is a warehouse manager and the sole provider for his family.
They are family dogs, so they are indoor dogs. They're around kids all the time. So when I say Mr. Tucker is shocked and saddened, he's shocked that he would have his kids around dogs that have been accused of what has happened. It's a tragic event.
Logan Bratz's family believes the tragedy could have been avoided.
We shouldn't have to deal with this. He was 6 years old.
Logan's family continues to grapple with the shock of his tragic death. They express being deeply moved and grateful for the overwhelming support they have received during this challenging time. Tucker initially faced misdemeanor reckless conduct charges, which were later upgraded to felony involuntary manslaughter and reckless conduct. If convicted, these charges carried a potential sentence of up to 20 years in prison. However, the charges were eventually reduced, significantly altering the penalties he faced. The judge reclassified the charges as misdemeanors, each carrying a maximum penalty of 1 year in prison. Karen Gabriel was in her car with several family members and friends driving back to their Meridian home from a Wallingford grocery store and pizza shop when their lives were forever changed in an instant. During the sentencing of 26-year-old Nicholas Fairchild from Guilford, Karen Gabriel's family spoke about the profound loss they had suffered.
She was, more than anyone else, my best friend.
Her son was one of 3 passengers seriously injured in the car his mother was driving. Despite the chaos of the crash, he vividly remembers a specific moment.
Even at the scene of the accident, she spent her final breaths consoling Jonathan and reassuring him that everything was going to be okay.
Jonathan, who was Karen Gabriel's front seat passenger, is engaged to her daughter.
I wake up in the middle of the night with fear in my heart. That last moment of her saying, "It's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay." In 2 seconds I sigh, I'm like, oh man, she's here. And then I realize, oh man, she's not there anymore.
Court records reveal that at the time of the crash at the intersection of North Main Street Extension and Route 68 in Wallingford, Fairchild's blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit. Additionally, he had cocaine and marijuana in his system.
If it is possible to die of grief or of a broken heart, then Nicholas Fairchild has in effect killed me too.
An accident reconstruction showed that Fairchild never applied his brakes and may have broadsided Gabriel's car while traveling at speeds of up to 59 miles per hour, which is twice the speed limit for that intersection.
The worst was having to sit there with my 6-year-old and tell her her grandma was not coming back home.
If people are gonna drink and drive, don't do it. Just take an Uber, call a friend, take a nap. Don't do it, please.
It was revealed in court that Fairchild had been convicted several years earlier of second-degree assault with a motor vehicle in a case strikingly similar to the one at hand. The judge also noted that Fairchild had violated his probation 3 times since then, highlighting his repeated disregard for the law. In 2021, Fairchild was sentenced to 15 years in prison for causing a fatal crash while driving under the influence. He pleaded guilty to several charges, including manslaughter with a motor vehicle, 3 counts of second-degree assault with a motor vehicle, and operating under the influence of alcohol and drugs. A drunk driver responsible for a wrong-way crash in 2018 that claimed the life of a man was sentenced to nearly 12 years in prison. The victim's family, understandably, was emotional in court. It was a difficult morning for both sides of the case. The sentencing began with the victim's family members sharing their final words before the judge.
I feel cheated, and I feel robbed.
I'm Justin Swab. He is buried next to my daughter, who died in 2005. Well, I think that there's a rule somewhere that the kids aren't supposed to die before the parents.
Justin Callahan's loved ones filled the courtroom, taking turns to speak about the profound loss they have experienced and how his death has deeply affected their lives. Lauren Freeman sobbed as she recalled the pain, while Callahan's father and brother spoke first, with other family members present in the courtroom, listening to their words. In February of 2018, Freeman, driving drunk, went the wrong way on the transition ramp between the I-5 and I-8. He crashed directly into Callahan's car, causing the fatal accident. Callahan had been on his way home to Ocean Beach from his job in Chula Vista. Freeman pleaded guilty to several charges, including gross vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated. She was initially charged with murder, but that charge was dropped as part of a plea deal. In exchange, she agreed to serve 11 years and 8 months in prison, with credit for about 1 year already served. Freeman took the stand about 15 minutes ago, delivering a tearful apology. She expressed that she would do anything to change what happened that night, and stated that she hopes Callahan's family can eventually find it in their hearts to forgive her. Jorge Britton was sentenced to 40 years in prison after being convicted of DUI manslaughter and vehicular homicide. Investigators reported that in December 2021, 36-year-old Britton was driving over 150 miles per hour on I-4 when he collided with another vehicle, resulting in the deaths of 2 men.
I think that's a determination to be made by the court.
During his trial, Jorge Britton claimed that he was not acting recklessly when the Audi sports car he was driving crashed into another vehicle along I-4, causing a fiery collision that killed Douglas K. Jr. and Jason Russella. However, the jury disagreed with his defense.
Mr. Britton showed no sign of remorse.
A victim's advocate read statements from the relatives of the 2 men who were killed, describing the deep pain and the void their deaths left behind.
You, in one night, destroyed our lives forever. You have caused immeasurable pain and suffering to all of us.
Investigators say Britton attended a hockey game, then drove to a Tampa strip club, and later to a casino before he and 2 female passengers got into his Audi sports car. Detectives reported that he was driving at 154 miles per hour at the moment of impact. While his family pleaded with the court for mercy, Britton asked for forgiveness, expressing regret for his actions.
And so I just ask for understanding and consider our 3 kids that we have.
I take full responsibility for my actions and the pain I have caused to these families. I will ask for your forgiveness. However, if I was in your shoes, I probably wouldn't forgive myself.
The state requested a life sentence for Britton, while his defense lawyers asked the court to grant him a second chance, proposing a sentence of 4 years followed by lengthy probation. The judge reprimanded Britton for failing to take responsibility for his actions and sentenced him to 40 years in prison.
You ask about a second chance, and if he fails, then we hammer him. But at what price? What would his second failure look like? His first failure was 2 dead people and 2 severely injured people. What happens the next time? Who wants to take that risk?
Since Britton is 36 years old, there is a possibility he may live to see the end of his prison sentence. The judge also added another 40 years of probation should that occur, ensuring continued oversight after his release. Caleb Fajardo has been sentenced to 12 years in prison after being convicted of intoxication manslaughter for the crash that killed Silvana Sandoval 2.5 years ago. Along with the prison sentence, he was also ordered to pay a $10,000 fine. The jury reached a guilty verdict after just 1 hour of deliberations, but the sentencing took much longer, 5.5 hours, due to the closing arguments. On that winter night, 22-year-old Caleb Fajardo was driving under the influence and speeding, with a blood alcohol level more than twice the legal limit and traveling at 70 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone. He collided with a van, severely injuring 61-year-old Silvana Sandoval, who tragically passed away 2 days later.
He's a danger to our community. And the only way we can stop that and protect our community is to put him in prison.
And to put him there for as long as the law allows. Prosecutor Jessica Frazier stated during closing arguments in the punishment phase of Fajardo's trial.
Send him in prison for 20 years. There are no mitigating factors that take you below 20.
Fajardo's lawyer urged the jury to consider the lower end of the punishment range, arguing that his client deserved a second chance.
I'm asking you to consider giving him probation so that he can do something to make changes.
His lawyer argued that sending Fajardo to prison would amount to just throwing him away. However, the jury determined that Fajardo's car was used as a deadly weapon. As a result, Fajardo will be required to serve half of his sentence before becoming eligible for parole. On June 3, 2023, a tragic series of events unfolded in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. Madison Shemitz, a high school athlete, was dining with her mother, Jacqueline Roger, at a local restaurant when they noticed Spencer Pearson, Madison's 19-year-old ex-boyfriend, in the area. Concerned due to prior issues following their breakup, Madison and her mother decided to leave the restaurant to avoid any interaction. However, Pearson followed them outside, and an altercation ensued. During the incident, both Madison and her mother sustained injuries as they attempted to protect each other. A bystander, Kennedy Armstrong, intervened and helped subdue Pearson. Pearson was later detained and taken into custody. The aftermath left Madison hospitalized and facing a long recovery, while her mother also required medical treatment for her injuries. The weeks and months following the incident were marked by Madison's extraordinary resilience. Despite the challenges she faced, including undergoing multiple surgeries and intensive physical therapy, she defied the odds by regaining her mobility. Her determination culminated in a triumphant moment when she walked across the stage at her high school graduation. Madison channeled her experience into raising awareness about domestic violence, becoming an advocate and a source of inspiration for many.
June 3rd of 2023, the events that unfolded on that afternoon were horrific. This defendant launched a vicious attack on a 17-year-old girl who had done nothing but show him love, and only weeks earlier had done her part to try to save his life when he attempted suicide. The same person that tried to save his life, he violently and viciously attacked. Many folks in this courtroom have declared Kennedy Armstrong a hero. This court has no quarrel with that assessment. Kennedy Armstrong is most certainly a hero. And but for his actions and the actions of Madison's mother, this defendant would have successfully killed Madison Shemitz.
In 2024, Spencer Pearson pleaded guilty to 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder with a weapon and 1 count of aggravated battery causing serious bodily injury with a weapon. The courtroom heard emotional victim impact statements during his sentencing hearing, with one of the most powerful testimonies delivered by Madison's older brother, Robert Cruz.
June 3rd, 2023 is the day my family and I's life changed forever. The phone call I received from my mother that day is an image I can't get out of my head, and the sound of her voice is something that plays in my head daily. That feeling of helplessness is a feeling I hope to never experience again. As an older brother and son, all I wanted to do was be there. I couldn't drive due to how distraught I was, so my friend drove me through the night to get to them that same day. Watching your mother and your sister fighting for their life is absolutely terrifying, but I don't think that is nearly as terrifying as what Madison had to endure months leading up to this incident. Being scared of someone she once trusted, being a new driver, and being followed by him in fear of her own safety in the town that she grew up in. This is what my little sister had to deal with due to the defendant's actions. Madison was my first younger sibling and my only little sister. With that being said, I have always had a deep sense of protection over her and have always loved and cherished being her older brother. If anyone knows Madison, they know that she is the light in every room she walks into. She never fails to make everyone laugh and smile. And for me, she was my first and very best friend. Being 6 years older than Madison, I was so excited to be a big brother, and I would sing to her while she would be in her crib. She would hold my finger and I would stay there for as long as she held it because I felt like I couldn't leave. Going from that to holding her hand, looking at her over her hospital bed is a drastic change that I never expected would happen, and I would have stood there forever if that's what she needed. As I'm here today, I'm honored to say that I do not see my sister cry or get scared or let this incident change who she is as a person. I've watched Madison grow, educate, inspire, and even comfort those affected by what happened to her and my mother. She has used what has happened to teach others and never complains about it. Madison has made a change not only in her school, but the community and other individuals around the world. Madison is the definition of using a negative and turning it into a positive, and I'm immensely and forever proud of the progress that she has made.
Cruz recounted the devastating day of the incident, describing how a phone call from his mother changed their lives forever. He spoke about his helplessness as he rushed to the hospital and the pain of seeing his sister and mother in such a vulnerable state. Reflecting on his bond with Madison, he shared memories of their close relationship, highlighting her unwavering strength and positivity, even in the face of adversity.
My mom is an amazing mother. My mom is an amazing mother, aunt, sister, and friend. But most importantly, she is one of the greatest people you could ever meet. She goes above and beyond for everyone and makes every child feel like her own, and the love she gives definitely does not go unnoticed. Everyone would be lucky to have her in their life, and I'm so lucky and so thankful I get to call her my mother. She is so proud of each and every one of her kids for different things, and will never pass up an opportunity to tell everyone's success before her own. I hope to be half the parent she is someday and half as strong as Madison, and if I can succeed in that, then I will feel accomplished. Spencer may have thought that he was taking my sister and my mother's life that day, but instead he only took his own freedom. And as her older brother, I ask that he is never able to have the freedom to do this to anyone else ever again. The pain from a high school breakup is not even comparable to the pain and trauma that my mother and sister have to endure from this horrific day for the rest of their life.
Cruz also praised their mother, calling her a pillar of strength and a beacon of love and resilience. His heartfelt plea to the court emphasized the importance of ensuring Pearson could never harm anyone else.
There are just certain crimes that are committed that merit the maximum possible sentence. And this court finds that this is one of them. Spencer Pearson, you have entered a plea of guilty to 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder with a weapon. As to counts 1 and 3 of the information, you are adjudicated guilty. You are sentenced to serve the remainder of your life in prison. As to count 5, you are adjudicated guilty. You are sentenced to serve 30 years in Florida State Prison. All sentences are to run concurrent with each other. Madam Clerk, please reflect that he has 536 days that he has previously served and impose the standard felony court costs.
On November 22, 2024, Spencer Pearson was sentenced to life in prison. The court acknowledged the severity of his crimes and the lifelong impact on Madison and her family. The sentence brought a sense of justice to the Shemitz family, though the emotional and physical scars remain. Today, Madison continues to inspire others with her journey. Through her advocacy and resilience, she has become a symbol of strength, using her experience to raise awareness about domestic violence and encourage others to overcome adversity. Melody Walker Ferris and her husband, Gary Ferris, a respected Atlanta area attorney, shared a complex and troubled marriage. Financial struggles and emotional tensions cast a shadow over their relationship, exacerbated by Melody's extramarital affair in 2009. Although Gary attempted to repair their bond, these efforts were hindered by persistent conflicts, leaving their family dynamic, strained, and unstable. On July 3, 2018, Gary was last seen tending to a fire on the couple's Cherokee County property. Melody claimed he had been working outside that evening, but failed to provide a coherent explanation when he did not return. Her inconsistent and evasive statements raised suspicion, prompting an investigation. As authorities delved deeper, troubling evidence emerged, including signs of an attempt to conceal Gary's disappearance. During her trial in late 2024, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence implicating Melody in her husband's death. Forensic findings, witness testimonies, and inconsistencies in Melody's account painted a damning picture of her guilt. The defense's strategy to shift blame to Scott and create doubt about Melody's involvement failed to sway the jury. In November 2024, Melody was convicted of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, concealing a death, and making false statements. At her sentencing hearing in December, Melody delivered an emotional statement, vehemently denying her involvement in Gary's death and reiterating her accusations against Scott.
Not only did I not do this, I know who did. I know Scott killed his father. He took my husband, the father of Chris, Emily, and Amanda. He took Big Daddy from our grandchildren, Ella, Addison, Olivia, Jax, and James, 3 of them who never got to know Gary. Scott, this is unforgivable. Scott, I have spent an entire life of loving and protecting you, but this I refuse to cover for you. My mother, your mom, begged me to take the blame for this. She said after she talked to you, after Gary died, that she knew you had done it. Her exact words were, "You are his mother. You have to take blame for this." And I told her no, that I couldn't. I still have 3 other children, grandchildren, and this is not a stolen credit card, a check, or a diamond ring that you've pawned, all of which you have done. I saw you coming from that burn pile the morning of July the 5th in your truck. You told me that you were checking on the fire to make sure that it wasn't going to get the woods on fire. You told me it was okay. I asked you a few weeks later why you were at that burn pile in your truck, and you told me that your dad had told you to clean up the extra wood that was by the barn. I told Hayes that I had seen Scott that morning coming from the burn pile. So, Hayes, where is that recording? I want to know. You told me there was multiple recorders. You did, but you sat here in this courtroom and you told this court that you didn't tell anybody about recorders, but you did. Where is that recording in the interview? You, Scott, immediately started saying that there was a gun missing. A nobody knew about. You never mentioned before. I asked you more days than not where your dad was, and this was the first time you ever had that response. There's a gun missing. You should have you did start immediately spinning your story. When you found out that Addison and Cameron were there the night before, you got so angry.
Melody accused her son, Scott Ferris, of being responsible for Gary's death. Melody asserted that her own mother had urged her to take the blame for the crime to protect Scott, but she refused, stating that she could not cover for him and still be there for her other family members. She alleged that she had seen Scott near a burn pile on their property on the morning after Gary's disappearance and claimed he had been acting suspiciously. Melody recounted seeing Scott's truck near the fire and stated he had used house cleaning supplies to wash the barn area, suggesting he was covering up a crime. She also accused Scott of exhibiting anger and aggression during the days following Gary's disappearance, including failing a polygraph test and attempting to control certain aspects of the investigation. Furthermore, Melody claimed Scott had fabricated stories to mislead authorities, such as a missing gun that was allegedly never mentioned before.
Scott, you called me on July the 4th and asked me what my plans were for the day. And I told you I was going to the lake with Amanda, and you were so glad that I was going. I thought it odd then. Now I know why. I found copies of my birth certificate, your dad's birth certificate, our marriage license in your truck. Now I know why. Scott, I saw Gary going to that barn the night of July the 3rd, right after you got home. And then Scott is going, and I thought then Scott's going to be in trouble for staying at the lake and playing golf all the time. Never in a million years did I ever think that this nightmare was starting then. I told you, Detective Hayes, that I saw Scott going over there to the barn. Where is that in the recording? A bag. I know exactly where and when I was standing. Scott, you put antifreeze under my kitchen sink to set me up for this. That only you would have known where it was because it was for the Mercedes. When Amanda and I were putting that house back together, you sat in there and watched us like a hawk. Now I know why. You became so angry when the fire investigator came in July, weeks after this nightmare started. Now I know why you were so angry. Scott, you failed your polygraph test. You recorded meetings at the attorney's office and turned them over to the DA's office. We hired Manny to help us. Emily is the one who used her daddy's credit card to pay for that attorney. Scott, you got so angry that your sister Amanda was getting my personal clothes and my personal things to the point that Cherokee County had to be called. That is not the actions of a sane person. Scott's anger issues have all been a huge issue. When he was in kindergarten and elementary school, Chris would...
I'm objecting. At this point, she's dragging Scott through the mud, and he's scared.
Despite these accusations, investigators found no concrete evidence to support her claims against Scott. The court dismissed her allegations as a baseless attempt to deflect blame and cloud the facts of the case. She maintained that she was innocent and begged the court to reconsider the verdict, but the judge firmly rejected her claims, emphasizing the overwhelming evidence of her guilt. Melody Walker Ferris was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after being found guilty of the murder of her husband, Gary Ferris, along with related charges. The court imposed a life sentence for murder with parole eligibility after 30 years and an additional 5 years for concealing Gary's death, citing her deliberate actions to hinder the investigation. A 5-year sentence for making a false statement will run concurrently with the other charges, as the court deemed it did not warrant further punishment. Ebony Miller, a 24-year-old University of Minnesota researcher, was on a promising path to becoming a doctor, dedicating her work to cancer research. Originally from the Bahamas, Miller was passionate about making a difference in the world and aspired to establish clinics to assist women in her home country. Tragically, her bright future was cut short on November 18, 2022, due to a senseless act of drunk driving. Kenneth Spencer, the man responsible for the fatal crash, had been driving under the influence with a blood alcohol concentration nearly twice the legal limit. The incident occurred at a high speed when Spencer ran a red light, colliding with Miller's vehicle in Minneapolis. At the time of the crash, Spencer did not have a valid driver's license due to a prior impaired driving conviction. Miller succumbed to her injuries at the scene. The devastating loss sent shockwaves through Miller's family and friends. Her boyfriend, Jack Morrison, described her as kind, loving, and incredibly talented. He shared their dreams of moving to Washington, D.C., where she planned to attend medical school at Howard University. Instead, Morrison found himself mourning her loss and struggling with the emotional toll of the tragedy.
Every time I say goodbye to someone, I wonder if it's the last time I'll ever hear or see them again. It's like a knife in my heart. I have panic attacks constantly, especially when a legal date like today is on the horizon. I cry almost every day. I'm not a crier at all. Anyone that knows me knows I can be emotional, but I don't cry. But I have, because I miss the person that made my life so peaceful and beautiful, and know that she can't come back. My friends and family have stepped up admirably, and I'm so thankful for them. They've done so much, and without them I wouldn't have graduated. I wouldn't have done the 4 jobs I had to work and teach my students every single day and get out of bed. But I still have the scars. As for the defendant, I have no concerns he'll be a threat to myself or my family. However, I'm concerned about what will happen to the community if the defendant does not make considerable and profound efforts to make a positive and meaningful change in his life. If the defendant is to receive probation, I would like the following conditions. These are my opinions, of course, and I know that you have the best judgment. But if he receives probation, I want the maximum amount of community service. But this should be community service that actually goes towards bettering someone, helping someone else that is going through a tough time, just like Ebony would want. But I want all of it with strict supervision. I want the maximum amount of mental health and chemical dependency evaluations that the state can give, with additional requirements that the defendant do take their medication for their underlying mental health conditions, with strict supervision. And lastly, I would request that the defendant undergo the maximum amount of classes for anger management and other behavioral needs that the state can mandate, once again with strict supervision.
Jack reflected on the profound impact of losing Ebony. He shared his struggles with grief, panic attacks, and a sense of despair, acknowledging the irreplaceable void her absence has left in his life. While expressing anger over the reckless actions of the defendant, Kenneth Spencer, Jack emphasized the need for accountability and meaningful rehabilitation. He urged for strict probation conditions, including community service, mental health evaluations, and behavioral therapy, should leniency be considered. Miller's family, including her father, gave emotional impact statements during the sentencing, highlighting the devastating loss of a vibrant young woman.
I sent my child away on education, and now she's on a box on my wall. Ashes, because of the selfish, inconsiderate action of one individual, an habitual offender. So I'm not here to forgive. There's no forgiveness for me because it was a choice that he made to drive drunk under the influence. That was a choice, a conscious choice. I'm here to ask the courts to just look at the evidence before the courts, his history, his intent, what he did, the circumstances surrounding this accident. And you know, you guys, you are in the U.S. system, we're in the Westminster system of law, and the maximum penalty here does not in any way, shape, or form fit the crime. You know, his actions were unforgivable in my eyesight. It's just a tragedy. You know, it changed so many things. And not only did he take away my daughter, he took away my lineage, my bloodline. He took away my life investment. He took away me. That is me.
Her father noted that Spencer's decision to drive drunk had not only taken his daughter's life, but also disrupted the family's legacy and future. The pain of her absence remains an irreplaceable void in their lives. In March 2023, Spencer pleaded guilty to criminal vehicular homicide, acknowledging the consequences of his actions. During the sentencing hearing in June 2023, Spencer expressed deep remorse.
To the Miller family, my name is Kenneth Spencer Jr. I'm reaching out to the family on the behalf of the expression my deepest condolences of the loss of a life that I removed from you all. I'm not sure what can bring the family full closure, but I hope and pray that this letter can be a start and bring healing to the death that should not have happened. It's very emotional to even think about, and I'm mentally not here. It hurts me every time I think about it. I know Miss Miller had goals to complete. She seemed like a very great human. I wish I could trade places with her every day. I should be gone, not Miss Miller. I'm really lost and would like help. I cannot forgive myself, and drugs and alcohol took my life over. I will take all the help that I can get, and this can be a start of honoring Miss Miller's life. Every day I wish I could have gotten out and helped her, but I was too hurt myself at the time to do anything but stand outside my car. This is very hard to deal with, and I consider myself a kind-hearted person that would never take someone's life, and most definitely wouldn't leave a family hurting and pain. I am in prayers for the family and as my family as well. I hope the family can find it in your hearts to forgive me eventually. There's no words that I can say that will bring Miss Miller back or change what I did. That happened that night of November 18th. I do hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me. And that is all I have to say.
He stated that he wished he could trade places with Miller. He described his struggle with mental health and substance abuse, acknowledging the pain he caused her family. The court sentenced Spencer to 42 months in prison, of which he is expected to serve approximately 28 months, followed by supervised release. This sentence, while within legal guidelines, felt insufficient to Miller's family, who believed it did not match the magnitude of their loss. The sentencing underscored the importance of accountability, but also highlighted the enduring pain of those left behind. Antoine Suggs, a 39-year-old man from Scottsdale, Arizona, was at the center of a tragic quadruple murder case that began on the night of September 12, 2021, in St. Paul, Minnesota. The victims, Jasmine Sturm, 30, her brother, Matthew Pettis, 26, her boyfriend, Lois Foreman III, 35, and her friend, Netosha Flug Presley, 30, spent the evening socializing at a local bar. The group was later seen leaving with Suggs, who had been romantically linked to Flug Presley. The events that unfolded afterward remain partially disputed. Suggs claimed during his trial that the victims attempted to rob him, prompting him to act in self-defense. However, evidence presented in court contradicted his account. On September 13th, the four friends were found to death in an SUV abandoned in a cornfield in Sheridan Township, Wisconsin. The vehicle was left with no apparent attempt to hide the bodies, and the discovery shocked the small rural community. Investigators quickly linked Suggs to the crime. Witnesses and surveillance footage helped establish that he had been with the victims that night. His father, Darren Osborne, was implicated for assisting in transporting the bodies to the remote cornfield. Authorities pieced together a timeline showing that Suggs fled to Arizona after the killings. Suggs was arrested in Arizona and extradited to Minnesota to face trial. Osborne, who admitted to aiding his son, later pleaded guilty to helping dispose of the bodies and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. During Suggs' trial in April 2023, prosecutors dismantled his self-defense claim. Evidence showed that the victims were execution style, with no signs supporting Suggs' account of a robbery or altercation.
Here's what I'm going to tell you, Mr. Suggs. There's nothing that this court's going to be able to tell you to get you off of this idea that you acted in self-defense. But what I will tell you is that it was the jury's belief, and it is this court's belief, that you did not act in self-defense. I do not know what happened, and there's only 5 people who knows what happened that night. And 4 of them are in a cemetery right now, and you're the only one here. So with that being said, the next question I had for myself is, what is the appropriate sentence and how to craft a sentence to think about rehabilitation and the possibility of you returning to the community, but also giving the victims the justice they deserve and accountability for your actions. I read your victim witness statements, and you had 26 of them, and as I read through them, I'm gonna be honest with you, as an African-American male, it broke my heart because every single one of them talked to you and talked about you as a loving father, which I have no doubt you are. I have no doubt about that. As someone who would give the clothes off of your back to them, and I have no doubt you would. As a family man, and I have no doubt that you are a family man. And I sat and weighed that story of who that person is with the story of someone who can kill 4 people, drive them around the city, dump them in a cornfield, and leave to Arizona, leave them never to be found but by the fortune of a field hand finding them. Those 2 people are different people, and there's no way I could reconcile who they are.
Judge Richard C. Solem acknowledged the devastating impact of Suggs' actions, which left 5 families, including Suggs' own, grappling with the aftermath. The judge noted the irreconcilable duality of Suggs' character, described by many as a devoted father and generous individual, yet responsible for the horrific act of taking 4 lives, abandoning their bodies in a cornfield, and fleeing to another state.
It is the judgment of this court that, having been found guilty by a jury on April 3rd, 2023 of the crime of second-degree murder with intent not premeditated in violation of Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 1 parens 1 as charged in count 1 of the complaint and standing convicting of that crime by the verdict of the jury, this court adjudicates and convicts you guilty of that offense. It is thereby the judgment of the court and the sentence of law that you be committed to the Commission of Correction of the state of Minnesota for a term of imprisonment of 326 months. That is minimum incarceration, 217 1/3 months. Maximized supervised release of 108 2/3 months. It is further ordered that you will be delivered immediately to the Commissioner of the Correction of the state of Minnesota. Against this, you will be given credit for 606 days. On this case, the court is also ordering restitution. I will reserve restitution for 90 days for the state to provide restitution information. Having been found guilty by a jury on April 3rd, 2003 to the crime of second-degree murder with intent not premeditated in violation of Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 1 parens 1 as charged in count 2 of the complaint and standing convicted of that crime upon the verdict of the jury. The court hereby adjudicates and convicts you guilty of that offense and is therefore the judgment of the court in the sentence of the law that you be committed to the Commission of Correction of the state of Minnesota for a term of imprisonment of 306 months. That is minimum incarceration, 204 months, maximized supervised release of 102 months. That sentence will run consecutive to count 1 of the complaint of the conviction. It is further ordered that you will be delivered immediately to the Commission of Corrections of the state of Minnesota. As it relates to count 3, having been found guilty by a jury on April 3rd, 2023 of the crime of second-degree murder with intent not premeditated in violation of Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 1 parens 1 as charged in count 3 of the complaint and standing convicted of this offense, is thereby the judgment of this court in sensitive law that you be committed to the Commission of Correction of the state of Minnesota for imprisonment of a term of 306 months, minimum incarceration 204 months, maximized supervised release 102 months. The court will note that that will be consecutive to count 2 in this matter. and restitution will be reserved for 90 days on that issue. Having been found guilty by a jury on April 3rd, 2023 to the crime of second-degree murder with intent not premeditated in violation of Minnesota Statute 609.19, Subdivision 1, Parens 1, is charged in count 4 of the complaint and standing convicted of that crime upon the verdict of the jury. The court hereby adjudicates and convicts you guilty of that offense. It is thereby the judgment of the court and sentence of law that you be committed to the Commission of Corrections for the state of Minnesota for imprisonment of a term of 306 months, minimum incarceration 204 months, maximized supervised release of 102 months. Against, the court will note that that will run consecutive to count 3. The court notes that the big decision I had to make was whether or not this would be consecutive or concurrent. And as I went back and forth, each one of these individuals, Natasha, Jasmine, Matthew, as well as Lois, deserves that you serve time for each one of them, and that this court found that consecutive sentences would not appreciate the severity of this offense, but more importantly, the effect of this offense on this community, the effect of this offense on the families. The fact is that I recognize what I've done here today. You are going to be serving 1,224 months in the correctional facility, and I recognize that in doing the math, because we here in the court talks about this in terms of months, that's 101 years.
The jury found Suggs guilty of 4 counts of second-degree murder. In May 2023, Judge Timothy J. Luby sentenced him to 1,244 months, approximately 103 years, in prison, with sentences for each count to be served consecutively. The judge highlighted Suggs' lack of remorse and his attempts to blame the victims for their deaths, factors that influenced the severity of the sentence. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.